How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have a very special guest for you. In fact, I've got a very special guest who is entering a special club, a fourth appearance on Strength Chat. Today, I'm joined by a man who needs no introduction. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Mike Tuchscherer. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
How are you? Obviously, it's been quite a busy period over the last couple of weeks. How has it been with obviously the US nationals and other things going on? Has that been keeping you busy?
Absolutely, man. It's been a pretty crazy time. You know, we went to the Arnold, the USAPL competition at the Arnold, and then the new Powerlifting America Federation had their nationals last weekend. So we were there for that. Really good. Both events were really good. You know, I'm optimistic about both organizations, really. I mean, they're obviously going some different directions, and that's unfortunate, and it definitely does create some hardship, but hopefully we can kind of keep things moving forward in a positive way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Because that's the thing where it's obviously there has been quite a change in US powerlifting, and the fact that seeing the competition over the weekend, did that what was the general feeling about that, having nationals and lifters getting there because of everything that had been going on over the last year or so?
It was nice. Honestly, it was nice. So the competition itself was fairly small, which is not unexpected, considering it was, kind of put together, or at least announced later. So the people who committed to it were mostly people who were trying to get to the IPF stage. Of course, there are others, but that, I think, is the main reason why it was still so small. But to be honest, it kind of harkens back to some of the older powerlifting competitions that we did. So there's a bit of nostalgia there for me. But it was very well supported. It was supported by Ilico and SBD, and we didn't want for anything related to that. And it was also nice to, I suppose, everyone that's been involved with Powerlifting America, at least from my perspective, has been fairly quiet, and for good reason. I'm sure that they've got a lot to do, but it was nice to be a little bit closer to that and hear some of the perspectives that are maybe not so easy to come by on social media.
Yeah.
So I would catalog it as a very positive experience, and everybody who was there was also appeared to me to be quite reasonable, about, lifters are going to lift in the place that suits them best. And like, these are all people who have been involved in powerlifting for a long time. Like, you don't just start and then your first day you're like, I'm making a new fed, right? So these are people who do understand that this sucks in a lot of ways, and this is, the messy divorce in a lot of ways. And so that's not good, but it's nice that, they do seem to understand that, and appreciate that on a personal level, if nothing else. So yeah, I came away with it, feeling positive and feeling optimistic about the future there, but also still feeling positive and optimistic for what's going on with the USAPL. So hopefully just powerlifting continues to grow, and it can be good for everyone.
Yeah, I think that last statement there kind of sums it up, because I know obviously, people get involved in powerlifting because they enjoy lifting, they catch that powerlifting bug and want to get involved in it. So the fact that everything was quite positive, from there, everyone enjoyed the competition is, what it's all about. I know, from a rugby perspective and football perspective, sometimes there can be a lot going on behind the scenes, whereas, people want to lift, people want to, do the sport that they want to do. In other news, in terms of competing as well, yourself returning to the platform, how
Absolutely.
did that feel?
Man, what a good time. So on March 19th, I did a competition. It was the first competition I've done in 6 years. So it was a big deal to me to get back on the platform. I got a lot of nice messages from people as well. And I don't know, I just bring that up to say that it's nice that, something that was meaningful to me was meaningful to some other people as well. So that was good.
And was the sort of, after, six years not being on the platform, was there some of those felt like first competition nerves? How was it? Or was it kind of just enjoying back being in, that mindset, if you like?
Honestly, I had very little competition nerves, and I didn't expect that, and I think I understand why that is the case. I just had very little expectation. I said, half jokingly, that my goal was to total more than I did at my last competition, which my last competition, 2016, was pretty terrible. I was dealing with a lot of pain, and training was just not good leading up to it. And I lifted some baby weights, and so wanting to exceed those marks is a fairly low bar. So I also didn't know what my top end would be. In training, I hadn't squatted or deadlifted anything heavier than like a single at 7 RPE, which is a little lighter than I would normally take an opener. Usually an opener for me is going to run about 7.5 RPE. So I'd done some squats and some deadlifts where I go, yeah, okay, that looks like it could be an opener, but I have no idea where the top end is. And I hadn't handled anything heavier than the opener in 6 years, so it made attempt selection fairly uncertain, but also there were no expectations with it either. We had no idea. I knew I was going to go out here and squat my opener, and after that, we'd figure out what the second attempt would be, and then, figure out the third attempt after that.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And honestly, it worked fine. I don't think I left, heaps on the platform or anything. We made good calls. I wasn't terribly nervous heading into it because I didn't have a lot of expectation. I knew I wanted to get this squat in, and that was about it.
Yeah, definitely. Because obviously, seeing you compete and enjoying the day and not having those expectations, it was, especially building up into chatting with you today, having listening through the RTS podcasts. I think one a couple of weeks ago was actually about tactics. So was there an element there of, shall I put this on the bar, or was there a little bit of, no, actually, let's stick to this plan a little bit? Because especially with the experience, the lifters that you've coached, was there a little element there of, I'm going to try and put this on?
Definitely. So, I mean, and I say there was no expectation for the top end, and that was intentional because, I'm no dummy. I can look at an opener and figure out, what would a reasonable top end be that would yield that opener, So I looked at that and totaled all those things up, and I said, man, it's going to total like right around 900 kilos, and then you start going, well, that would be cool, man. My first competition back in 6 years totaled 900 kilos. But I had to stop myself there, to say, look, you don't really know if any of these numbers are good estimates or not. They're just numbers. Let's not set a lot of expectation around that. This is the first competition back in 6 years. We don't need to push and really strive for a lot of things here. We just need to get a good solid total in, come out of this having competed and shown some guts, but definitely come out healthy, and, let's keep the goal in mind. And so when I kind of gave myself that little pep talk, I guess, I would kind of push those thoughts out, you know? So that works well enough on the squat, and the bench is the bench, and you're focused on, just building a subtotal. Now, when it comes time to deadlift, I hit my opener, and I guess where I came down was, my squat ended up like 2.5 kilos below that perfect plan A. My bench was 2.5 kilos below that perfect plan A. And so I'm looking at it going, all right, a little bit 5 kilos down at the subtotal. We could take some bigger jumps and, maybe swing for it on a third deadlift, But again, like, keep in mind, this is heavier weights than I've handled in years, so we have no idea. So I took the opener. I mean, everything was feeling great. Made the planned jump to the second attempt, and that moved like a second attempt. It didn't move like, it wasn't just flying, but it moved how you would expect a second attempt to move. So I put in the planned, like the A plan third attempt, which would lead to an 895 kilo total. And I thought, just put in the attempt, and you've got time to make a change on a third deadlift if you need it. So put in the attempt, and I'm thinking about it. And, I'm very emotionally invested in it at this point, and I know that my own decision-making maybe isn't the best. So I looked at the video, I consulted a coach friend of mine who was there, and he said to me, which, by the way, this is why it's one of the reasons why even experienced people do well to have a coach in competition, is just the outside perspective. And he says to me, like, well, I mean, you could, it's the second attempt moved in a way that, adding an extra 5 kilos over the planned jump is going to be a risk. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not, and he says, well, what are you going to be happier with? You total 895 and have some room to spare, and you go, yeah, I could have done it, but I didn't. Or maybe you swing for it and miss. Yeah. And how do you feel about that? And I said, kind of keeping everything in mind, I'm going to stick to the plan, and I would rather come away 9 for 9, have another 800-pound deadlift, and be able to say, this went exceptionally well, and I could have if I wanted to, and I thought that would be a better scenario. So that's what I did. And I look at that deadlift and I go, it was a tough deadlift, but if it was 5 kilos heavier, I could have stood up with it.
Yeah, you can see from there as well, especially, chatting about it, enjoying the day and knowing that you could have done it, and, any competitions coming up again or anything like that, right. Okay, there's gonna be a little bit more there. How were you feeling after the competition? So obviously come out of it, no injuries or anything like that. How were you feeling afterwards? What was the post competition feed?
Man, it was, it's great, and it's a feeling that I remember. The competition that goes well, and just that there's a satisfied feeling that is there in those couple hours after. And that was something that I definitely missed. But yeah, you get together with your buddies, you go out and have some food. And I mean, the this was a USAPL competition. So technically I only needed to make 125 kilos body weight, which is easy. I walk around less than that, but I thought I see myself potentially competing in the IPF maybe eventually. So provided I can get back to that level, so I thought I'm going to make 120 just to do it. And also it helps, like there's a ritual to this that helps, I think. So like in the week prior, you start to do whatever your weight manipulation protocol is. And to me, that helps to kind of usher in this competition mindset. I've done it a ton of times, right? And so I was doing that same type of thing, and I said, I want to make 120 for it. So I did so after the competition, you're definitely ready to not be doing your weight maintenance protocol anymore, right?
Yeah, especially with that as well. Talking about coming out of the competition, a big confidence boost, not having any niggles or injuries or anything like that, and you having spoken with other lifters and coaches that I know who have had injuries, especially having 6 years from being away on the platform. I know you've documented your training with front squats and other things that you've done. How did you kind of manage that transition in terms of, right, okay, I'm gonna start gravitating more towards a competition, and maybe the mindset or patient side of things surrounding that? Because I know sometimes when it comes to either taking a step back from the competition lifts, or just pivoting a little bit in terms of, right, what am I actually going to get out of training? Sometimes lifters can rush back, and then they just end up having a cycle of a little bit of progress dropping off. How did you kind of find that between your last competition, managing injuries, and then getting back on the platform a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah. So my last competition being in 2016 was definitely, dealing with pain and everything. And I was sick of it. And so I decided I'm not going to do anything that hurts. So there's no squatting, no deadlifting, but I found I could do front squats. I could train back, I could do lots of things, but there were certain things that I couldn't do. And it all had to do with shearing, well, what looks like shearing loads, so anything that put me in like a forward lean position. That's why front squats seem to be fine. So I just focused on that, and I didn't have to disengage as much as I did. I think that's worth pointing out. Like, I probably took 4 years before I even tried to add the competition lifts back in. Now, part of that was I had gotten a bit burned out from dealing with all the pain and everything. I should also point out, like, I was very fortunate that I didn't have any sort of pain or issue in my day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So when I started doing front squats and everything, I kind of fell back in love with training. I realized this is something I just really like to do. So let's do it. Let's focus on that. And so that's the way it went. And I kind of got front squat goals, and I would joke about it, half joke about it, that, this is something that no one else in the world cares about, but I care about it. I want to do this. So I want to figure this out. So it helped me connect a little bit more with what is my real reason for lifting weights to begin with, which is nice. It's a nice benefit, but then eventually, I said, hey, I want to at least try this. I want to try to reintroduce squatting and deadlifting. I hadn't had any pain in a long time. And so to start back, you always start slow, and you start crazy slow. And I was using like an exposure based model for reintroduction. You hear Jordan at Barbell Medicine talk about this a lot, and several other people in that space as well at this point. So I started with something very light, like 150 kilos, 140 kilos, and just added 2.5 kilos a week, and I'd made several attempts at like reintroduction. My problem was, in those beginning stages, it's so light that it doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel like training. It feels like nothing, because I'm taking, like, think about taking, like 30-40% of your max for 3 sets of 5. It's just, this is a warm up, right? And whenever I was busy or anything like that came up, that was the first thing that would get cut out. Like, oh, I just don't have time today. I got to go. So I'll get it some other time this week. And then you don't. and then it's been 2 months, and then you're like, well, I guess I got to start over again, you know. So finding a system that works was really important for me. And for me, the system that worked was to include it as part of my warm up, you know. So, and to change it from, you know, 3 sets of 5 to 1 set of 10, you know. So I would just do 1 set of 10 on my way up to something else in the front squat, you know, and I would do like 1 set of 10 deadlift on my way to something else, doing some rows, you know, and that worked. And it would get heavier and heavier and heavier until the point where, you know, hey, this 1 set of 10 is actually pretty damn hard, you know, and then it's starting to feel like actual training again. And I mean, that's many, many, many weeks, you know, but it's starting to feel like actual training again. And it's easier to devote the time resources to it once it feels like training. And so then you keep going. You know, I took that 1 set of 10 up to like a all-time PR set of 10. Actually, it just kept it going as long as it would go.
Yeah.
And then dropped it to 1 set of 8, and then 2 sets of 5, and then 2 or 3 sets of 3. And I mean, by the time you're doing something that's, you know, fairly difficult for a set of 5 or 3, like this is actual training again. You know, you're pretty much back. Now the thing is, I wanted to be careful of like trying to flip this switch to thinking like, oh, okay, I'm back now. Now I need to do a powerlifting program again.
Yeah.
You know, it's too much. You know, I needed to take the very next step and not too many steps. You know, don't try to take more than 1 step at a time. So for me, it was, okay, you know, I'm squatting once a week, you know, and it was serious training by this time. Like, let's just keep that, you know, and let's not make the volume of that squat session anything crazy, you know, just the next increment, you know. So going into this competition, I was training squatting and deadlifting once a week. And for squats, I was doing probably 4 working sets. And deadlift, I was doing like 2 or 3 working sets.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like, I mean, I was still doing other lower body training, right? Like I was still doing a lot of front squats. I was still doing belt squats and single leg stuff. And that I think is really important. But the competition squat and deadlift were what I considered my higher risk activities.
Yeah.
You know, so I didn't want to let those things go crazy. And I think it's pretty cool that, you know, I totaled, well, I think squat and deadlift were something like 15 kilos or so under my all-time personal bests.
Right.
You know, so I mean, it wasn't crazy far off, and they're responding to training. They're getting better. They were getting better at the time of the competition too. So if, you know, things continue along this line, you know, who knows where that goes. And I mean, if I think back to the training I was doing, you know, my best competitions in 2014 were crazy training sessions by comparison. And I think, man, if I can get just as strong or maybe even stronger, who knows what the future holds, and do that by doing less training, I'm okay with that, you know.
Yeah.
Or at least less high risk training, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, you know, there's always that thought process of, you know, training will always adapt and change depending on where the lifter is in their career or their journey, you know. And absolutely, you know, if there's it's the ideal. If you can do less and get more out of it, that's ideal. One thing that you mentioned there, that you said to point out that you didn't have pain in sort of, you know, your day-to-day life. And when you were talking there about training, sort of 2 follow-up questions from that. Did you find that because you didn't have pain day to day, that it found it easier to sort of experiment with training and sort of take your time and be like, find out what works? And then flip that on from your point of view as a coach with the lifters that you've worked with, have you, is it kind of a different scenario working with lifters who potentially have pain day to day when they've gone past that point where it's just through training?
I mean, I think if you have pain day to day, that's your number 1 priority to deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, that gets exhausting in such a hurry. You know, I've worked with a few lifters now who've had chronic pain, and incidentally, it was not training related. So there was like nothing that we could really do about it from a training perspective. These were genetic issues that they had. But I mean, it just saps your energy. It saps your outlook. It's just the only thing really that matters. And it gets to be that way. So I would say that if you've got pain day to day, then that becomes your number one priority to deal with. And once that's dealt with, we can start worrying about things like, self-actualizing yourself at this competition or something,
Yeah, definitely. Because it's that, I know when you mentioned there, if you're doing, 3x5 of 40 or 50%, that's an actually ideal situation to be in, as opposed to, not being able to bend down and tie your shoes or whatever it may be, because, I can completely understand how that can be, you kind of can't see past that until you can do those things to get training. Sorry, go on.
You should recognize, like, when you're in over your head as well. Like, this little scenario that I went through turned out to be something very manageable that I could handle myself. I mean, I definitely did consult with professionals along the way. I mean, it's been some years, right? So I've definitely worked with some pros. But the approach that I ended up using, I mean, something that I learned from some professionals in this field. And we had gone over it, and I kind of knew the path, but it's like, look, this is going to take a long time, and it's simple enough. I can manage this, but if it was something like I was dealing with pain day to day, then look, I'm going to be enlisting help directly and try to figure this out, as quickly as we can manage.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's that kind of thing of, and I know, this might be a separate tangent or rabbit hole to go down, but, that pain of, being able to assess, right, okay, like what you mentioned there, I'm not going to do anything that causes pain. There's no kind of, there's going to be no success from just trying to work through it. There's always going to be competitions. There's always going to be things that you can do there. Whereas, actually just taking time to address those issues, I think in the longer term, he's going to be a lot better. The other kind of thing I wanted to touch on from there, and I think you actually shared something about this not so long ago, in terms of experimenting with training and then having an understanding of when you're using that with athletes. And I know obviously there's different training models, sets, reps, all those sorts of things, but I kind of wanted to touch on obviously the flywheel that you've used. I actually had a demo. I didn't realize it was Exafly that you've used. I actually had a demo from Exafly. Come to the gym for a flywheel. One of the other coaches use it. But I always thought that was from or I've only seen it used in like sports performance in terms of team sports. Also, like the velocity-based training from a strength and conditioning background. And I just kind of wanted to touch on, how have you used that? How have you experimented around that to see how that can benefit, powerlifters, and sort of the other experimenting that you've done to then sort of, right, how can I implement with my lifters to then get them ultimately stronger and perform better?
Yeah. Well, the flywheel itself is a really neat piece of equipment, and it's different. It was definitely something that I couldn't conceptualize before I had played around with one. But then, after I did, I was like, I've got to get my hands on one of these. And I went with the Exafly portable as well.
Yeah.
And the reason I did, my interest in this is maybe not exclusively in the portable aspects of it, but that becomes a really strong feature for me because I have some unique circumstances maybe. So in prior to 2020, we lived in the Netherlands, and 2020 there's a pandemic, everything shuts down. Around the same time, we moved back to the US, and during that move, I have a home gym that I've used for years, and all that gets packed up and shipped. All the other gyms are shut down. So I'm left with, whatever I can pack in a suitcase for around 3 months. So if you go back in my IG, you can see me doing stuff like isometrics with tie down straps and lots of band resisted. I got really good at band resisted like push-ups and band resisted like split squats and things like that. And there's a lot of skill in being able to train that way. And if you're like, for me, if I'm ever in a situation where I'm on the road or it's just not convenient to go to the gym, I feel like I can manage that now, at least for a little while. But that was also part of my interest in the flywheel is, well, how do you do like serious training? What if you were going to be in this kind of traveling situation for a prolonged period of time? You wanted to do serious training. So the flywheel seemed like a reasonable option for getting high resistance in kind of a no gym situation. And it is, but it also does more than that. I've been able to kind of explore that space a little bit and try to wrap my head around what exactly is going on here. And it's not straightforward. It's not on the surface. You can make some analogs to traditional weight training, but if you start to look at it a little bit more deeply, it's not like traditional weight training. It's got some aspects of it are like variable resistance training, but not entirely. It's its own thing, and it's really interesting. It's something I like to exercise my nerd brain on, but it's fun to play with for sure, and it gives you a lot of options.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the more I've sort of read into it and used it, because similar to lockdown and everything, one of the coaches that I work with, one of his friends is an engineer and actually made one. So we had this homemade one, and actually during lockdown when it was when we got to a point in the UK where we couldn't carry kit outside, a lot of lifters that I coached had home gyms, which was really useful, lent them plates. But then for a lot of people, obviously they still wanted to train, and it is a useful tool the more I've sort of looked into it. On a little bit of a tangent from there, with the portable, obviously you can get the one that's racked on the wall for upper body. Have you played around with that, or has it mainly been sort of the lower body side of things that you've done? Like how much? Because the only upper body, there's a guy who owns a gym further down south in the UK who is trains a lot of golfers, and I found it's used for that. And I'm kind of the bigger version. Obviously you can get a bench and all those sorts of things on. Have you played around with the upper body variations of it? Or
so a little bit, and this brings me into some more detail on the flywheel stuff, which I think is useful. If you're interested in using a flywheel for development of strength, you want to make sure that the flywheel that you get has enough inertia that you can train slow. So you imagine lifting a heavy percentage of your 1RM. You're trying to lift fast, but it's slow because there's a high resistance, right? And you want something similar on a flywheel. And the way that you get that on a flywheel is the inertia. And some flywheels have a fairly low inertia limit. So you're going to be lifting fast, and you can get, and this is usually what I see in athletics. They're doing it pretty fast, and they're getting some good eccentric overload based on the way that they're using it. But I don't think that it would be real useful for a powerlifter trying to develop slow strength, right? Trying to develop maximum strength. But one of the things I like about Exerfly is that you can load a boatload of inertia on this thing, and in terms of options, that you have. I've used it for a lot of belt squats, and I've also used it for flywheel push-ups. I've kind of used some tie down straps to make this harness that goes around my shoulders, and I clip it, and I use made some handles out of PVC pipe, and you can do push-ups on this thing like that. And that seems like a good way. That would be how I would train bench press, for example, using the equipment that I've got. I know with some of the bigger like platform models and stuff like that, you can have an actual bench, and there's 2 flywheels going, and I don't have anything that could set up like that. And I actually haven't set mine up as a rack mounted version either,
Right.
although I know you can. My colleague John Garfano has done a lot of this. He's got a rack mounted version and an Exerfly portable. So
Right.
he's got quite the flywheel setup, which, as time goes on, like I see more and more benefits to stuff like that. I go, man, he doesn't spend a lot of time like setting up these different exercises. He just like, grabs it and goes, and that would be nice in terms of like time efficiency.
Yeah, definitely. And when we're talking about these things, it's a little bit like what you mentioned about the traditional style of programming. Okay, it might not be there, for maximal strength, but there's a lot of other tools or systems that are coming in place outside of traditional powerlifting, if you like. And when you've been experimenting or looking at other areas of what you can add into powerlifting to benefit lifters, can you see potentially a lot more of these tools? I mean, obviously, everything comes down to a cost, and not everyone has velocity-based training tools or flywheels or anything like that. But
Yeah.
Can you see a place for all of these other tools? Is that something that is going to be more beneficial, or is it just gimmicky things that we can play around with, or can it actually be beneficial to the sport, if you like?
I'm optimistic about like the real benefits there, and I think even if you could look at it and say for sure without a doubt there's no direct benefit to it, it's a gimmicky thing that just makes athletes feel better, well then that's not a gimmicky thing, right? Like we know that having athletes that are more engaged, more attentive to their training, putting more effort into it, that's a big deal. So I would say even that level of value is important, and worth considering. And when it comes to something like velocity, that's a tool that I think is very, very underrated. I think, well, let me give you an example, because there's so many possible ways to use it and so many possible benefits, and it's going to depend on a lot of systems and a lot of contexts, right? But one way that it's been really useful to me, you wouldn't think of like a velocity device helping you improve your technique, but it has. In this last block, when I was bench pressing, I had a workout that was a series of singles at a 7 RPE. So it was not super heavy, but it was heavy enough. It was heavy enough that you can push on it, right? Sorry, my phone's making a bunch of noise here. Let me turn that off. But it's heavy enough that you can push on it. And what I would do is, set up this velocity device, and say you're doing a series of 6 singles at a 7 RPE or thereabout. What you would notice is that, some reps are a little bit faster than others, and you can feel the difference, but it's different when it's quantified. You have some reps that you're like, man, that felt really good. That moved well, and other reps, not so much. Now, when you can look at this thing and say, oh, that was actually, 0.04 meters a second faster, that was a big change, then you start to ask yourself, like, what's different about these reps, and you start to notice things about technique that are not necessarily visible. these are like if I tighten my lats like this, if I bring the bar down just slightly before I start my descent, those reps are faster, and I've looked at the film and I go, man, I would never think to point out like these tiny variances like this, but it matters when it's a heavy single, and it helped me to be more consistent and to better express my strength. So yeah, I mean, I found a lot of utility in that recently, which was kind of an unexpected place.
Yeah, I think the key thing that you mentioned there was to express strength, because yes, the ultimate goal is to get a bigger total. Yeah, it's nice to hit PBs and all those sorts of things. However, there's only going to be at some point there needs to be a little bit of a change, or use different things to then express strength and get stronger. And it's interesting, when you mentioned there about technique. Literally had a conversation this morning with one of the coaches that I work with, and we've been playing around with the velocity based training, and they use the same weight maybe a couple of months apart, but they moved the same weight twice as fast as what they did a couple of months ago. So even though it's not necessarily more weight on the bar, it's pretty good. You could have a pretty good guess of, yeah, they're definitely stronger. There's going to be more there, and tying that into the fact of, when we were talking about, your competition in terms of, could I have walked away? Could I have done more? I think that's always a better feeling, and instills a little bit more confidence, as opposed to grinding out more reps, increasing the risk of injury, and then thinking, oh well, actually that wasn't very good. Is that what you found? Is that's kind of your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, it gives you a better progress check, like more granularity to your progress check, and it's something that's outside of your subjective perceptions. So there's a common criticism of RPE in general, right? That people misrate their RPE. They fudge the numbers on it to make it give them what they want. And fair enough. I mean, to me, that's a criticism of the use of the tool as much as it is the tool itself. But, I'll happily admit that velocity is a little bit more robust to that type of misuse. It gives you something that's a little bit more concrete, something a little more that you can put your weight on. But yeah, I like it for that reason as well. You can use it to help you gauge RPE, but you can do a lot more with it than that as well. Landon Hickmott did a velocity-based training course for us, and I learned a lot from that course. I've been using velocity in my training since like 2008. Like I've got so much velocity data, it's ridiculous. But I learned some neat techniques from that course. Like for one, he talks about using first rep velocity, and that you can make a first rep velocity profile. So imagine that you're having a test day where you're going to work up to a 1RM. Well, if you monitor the velocity, the first rep velocity all along the way, when you get done, you'll be able to look back and say, okay, 80% moves this fast, first rep moves this fast, 85% is this fast, and so on. So the next time you're in the gym, like velocity stays fairly stable. So next time you're in the gym, if the first rep velocity lines up with that 85% number, then it's 85%. And that's true whether it's a single or a set of 4 or whatever you're doing. I mean, set of 4 with 85% to me sounds like pretty good. But I mean, there again, like everybody's a little bit different there. And it's especially useful on the deadlift. Yeah. Because what we see on the deadlift is the first rep is often slow. And then the second rep will be faster. Third reps even sometimes will be faster. But that first rep is the one that's the most concerning, right? Yes. So I've definitely seen situations where, you can have a lifter who can damn near they can do a double with damn near their maximum, so being able to parse that out and view it with a little more clarity is really useful.
Yeah, I think from there, when you mentioned about the data, when we're speaking about all these tools, because it's beyond that, just that weight on the bar. It's digging a little bit deeper. It's using a little bit more. Do you find, because I always kind of mention this, and that as powerlifting as a sport grows and grows, the level of professionalism grows and grows, from the athlete's point of view, the coach's point of view, the data, the amount of data that is out there. Do you think that tools like this, and I know a good example of, is it as benefit, is it a gimmick? Obviously, given the right circumstances, the right time throughout the season, if you like, of a lifter, that tools like this are getting incorporated a little bit more, and the level of professionalism is just going to keep increasing, because especially some of the things that we've touched on, they're used within professional sports teams, whereas the powerlifting side of things, for a lot of people, it's like this is the investing a lot more in it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's improving, but I think that we need some better info systems before we'll see widespread adoption of velocity. That I find a lot of people feel like velocity doesn't give them the information. It doesn't give them something that's worth the effort to set it up. Yeah. And when I dig a little bit deeper, it's they don't see it the way that I do. And if there was a more integrated way for it to work, then there's several layers of interpretation that I'm putting onto this. Like the device just tells me, hey, that was 0.24 meters per second. And it's up to you to figure out, is that good? Is that bad? Should you move up? Should you not? Like, what is this telling you? Well, you've got to interpret that. And where a lot of lifters are, they're unwilling or unable to do that interpretation. So if you could put another layer with it that did a lot of that analysis for you. Now the line starts to blur between, just simply sports science and like coaching, so you've got to get a system that at least lets the coach set some expectations, or or that's making those expectations on behalf of the coach or something. But like, imagine a system where you set this device up, and your target weight for today is 100 kilos for triple, and you do your 100 kilos for triple, and it says, well, you're strong today, so do another set at 105. And you go, oh wow, okay, so you do another set at 105. Or it says, maybe you're fatiguing faster than what we want today, so we're gonna drop the last set, or we need to reduce the weight by this much, or now they're getting better with being able to 3D sense bar position. You can imagine a scenario where it's saying, hey, the variability in your bar path is too much, so we need to reduce the weight, or maybe cut the session early, or something like that. And that, of course, has to get rolled in to the rest of the systems as well, so that you're not just dumping training volume or increasing training volume without regard to the other context. So, I mean, there's a lot of complexity here in where it could go, but I think that would be super awesome. Of course I do, right? But if you could do it in a user-friendly enough way so that you take, your average powerlifter who's like, look, man, I just want to lift weights, and it can tell you what you would know if you were just training right there beside some of the best coaches, then man, that's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that you mentioned there, user friendly, because for everything, there's you can dive right into the minutiae of everything, which to some people will be, oh yeah, that's really interesting, whereas actually the data that you want to use as a coach isn't necessarily what the lifter potentially needs or wants. It's just a case of, hey, look, am I getting stronger? But no, that's a thought process that, you know, would be exciting to see the more it develops. And like I say, especially with the flywheel and the other tools. I saw you put on the X-Fly, and I was like, I literally had them coming to the gym, which I thought was cool. Quite a lot of things touched on there: injuries, training, tools for powerlifting. But as usual, the last question that I like to ask, from everything that we've chatted about there, whether it be for coaches listening or lifters listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom from what we've chatted about today?
I guess probably the biggest thing that would be applicable to the most people is to not get caught up in what you ought to be doing, or what or at least make sure that you're clear-headed when it comes to that analysis of what you ought to be doing. That I think a lot of people ought to be just taking the next step instead of trying to jump completely into, something, an entirely different system or a different approach or something like that. I mentioned already, my colleague John, something else that he likes to say is solve the problem that's in front of you. And that's something that's very clarifying. Like, I still get caught up in this stuff. Like, I write my own training. I like to tinker with it, and self-coached at heart. So, and I'll be sitting there writing it, and I get caught up in the same shit that everyone else does, and I start thinking about different models and different ways of doing this or that. And what if we sequence it this way and that way? And it can start to feel overwhelming, start to feel confusing. And if you just take a step back and say, what's the problem that's in front of me? What's the next thing that I need to solve? Then that's a very clarifying question to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a really good words of wisdom to finish on, because absolutely, I think you can sort of forget what's actually, what's the problem, what's the task in front of you that you that you need to fix or solve or work past. Thanks a lot, Mike, for taking the time to jump on. I enjoy every time you've been on the podcast. This is no exception. I know, obviously, reactive training systems, but if there is anything, because I know obviously with the RTS community now, a couple of things have changed in terms of what you're delivering with RTS. If anyone has any questions about what we've chatted about today, or see the products that yourself and RTS putting out there, where can people reach out or find all that information?
Let's see. I mean, the usual ways, I suppose. Instagram is a good one, and we have our contact information on the Reactive Training Systems website. I think it's worth mentioning too that by the time this podcast posts, we'll have a new thing that we're bringing out. We've been calling it the Training Lab recently, and so far, the focus of it has been this community aspect that you mentioned, which I'll put a pin in that and come back to it in a second, because I think that's super, super undervalued, and it's more than it sounds like on the surface. But there's going to be a lot of software that comes with this, and the idea is to help people kind of figure this problem out, right? To figure out the problem of individualizing training to fit an athlete. Whether you're self-coached or you're coaching other people, that you would be able to look at your coaching dashboard and assess which lifters are progressing, which lifters are not progressing in a very quick way, and then drill into that data and say, okay, Johnny's not progressing the way that we want him to. So what's going on with that? Okay, I see his fatigue is really high. He's left me these notes in his training log. And then you can go over to the program builder, take a look at that and say, okay, well, I've got his training stress dialed up too high, so I'm going to remove these sets and deploy the training this way. And that way the training shows up in Johnny's calendar. We'll generate target weights for him. So hopefully it'll help him get closer to his RPEs and be more accurate in the training he's actually executing on the distant end. And then you can run reports. You'll be able to run reports as from the training lab that are not available otherwise. So that'll be a new feature as well. And then kind of going back into the community, it's this reach back toward expert support, and really the centerpiece there is the office hours. So all the RTS coaches run office hours. These are live meetings where you can just jump in and talk to a coach, talk to a professional who's got a lot of experience doing this, bounce ideas, get a double check on this or that. If you've got a client and you're kind of stumped, maybe you can generate some new ideas that you hadn't thought of otherwise. Or if you've got specific problems, say you've got somebody who's injured, we'll jump on a call with a rehab professional. Or if you've got somebody, you have some technique questions, jump on a call with a biomechanist. You can talk to somebody about nutrition and all these different subject matter experts, even outside the scope of RTS itself. So all this is going to get packaged together. And like I said, like I built it with kind of the self-coached athlete in mind, but of course it scales up for people who are coaching others as well.
Oh, cool! That sounds exciting. There's every time we've spoken, I think there's been a level on a level of what's been coming out, which is cool. For any new listeners, if you haven't checked out the content that Mike puts out there, RTS, you're missing a trick. 100%. I've followed Mike and RTS for a lot of years now, and there's some really useful content out there.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mike, for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will catch up with you all next week.